My name is Haley Wynn, and I am a licensed master social worker, and I work for Christ First Counseling as a therapist. So I'm really excited for the privilege of getting to share with you about trauma. I just know we're going to jump into it really hard and really fast. So I have a lot of information to cover. So feel free to take notes if you're a note taker, if you think that's going to help you. Like I said, we're going to be covering a lot of content in a short amount of time. So I'm going to try to get through everything as best we can. So to start off, obviously, what is trauma, right? So that's a word that often gets thrown around a lot. But the general definition of trauma is it's a psychological, emotional response to an event or an experience that is deeply distressing or disturbing. So most of us in here have probably went through an event that we would consider distressing or disturbing, right? But a traumatic event is defined a little bit differently. So with a traumatic event, there's overwhelming stress from an event. You're unable to integrate emotions involved. There's damage of the mind. And that could be anything that you're directly experiencing, witnessing, or learning that the event occurred to a close family member or caregiver. Okay, so that's just kind of general definition. Some various traumatic experiences, that could be domestic or family violence, dating violence, or maybe something comes up for you. Feel free, if you need to take a break, step outside the room, if you need to check in with me or someone else after, that's really, really important, okay? Some of the stuff that I talk about you may not have really heard about before, and it could be a hard reality learning about it for the first time. So just be mindful of that, be okay if it's uncomfortable, and we're gonna keep going otherwise. So there's four or five types of trauma. The first one is acute trauma. So acute trauma is considered a one-time singular traumatic event that causes a normal amount of distress considering the circumstances. So that distress typically happens in a limited amount of time. So let's say that you got into a car crash and no other distressing events happened within that time frame other than the car crash. Okay, so that might be something that's considered acute trauma. Chronic trauma is experiencing multiple traumatic events. They may be varied in circumstances or be the same negative event or experience that happens repetitively. And so if you are being physically abused at home and that's something that happens frequently over and over and over again, that would be something that's considered chronic trauma. Or maybe you were in a car accident and then you got into a physical altercation with someone and then you got robbed, right? That's going to be chronic trauma as well because you experienced multiple different types of trauma. Now, complex trauma is the impact chronic trauma has on a child's life and developing systems. So when we talk throughout the rest of this training, we're going to be addressing specifically complex trauma, okay? Not necessarily the acute trauma that we mentioned before. Chronic and complex trauma are often used interchangeably, so be mindful of that. Also, system-induced trauma. This is the traumatic removal from home to a justice or treatment facility. So that might be like someone getting taken from their home to go to juvenile detention center, or someone getting taken away to like an inpatient facility or foster care or something like that. And then the last piece I want to acknowledge is secondary trauma, which you'll see there right in the little middle part. Secondary trauma can happen across all types of trauma. And it's simply just traumatic stress that happens from learning about somebody else's trauma. Okay. So one last thing there. A child with complex trauma is often developmentally less than half their chronological age. And so what that means is that if a child has gone through complex trauma through most of their childhood, by the time they're 12, they might actually developmentally act more like a 6-year-old. Or respond more like a 6-year-old. So that's going to be really important while you guys are working with the different students in launch. The reason why we're talking about the different types of trauma and all these different areas of trauma is because a lot of the kids that will be coming to the program have most likely gone through complex trauma. So that's really why this is such an important training and why we're highlighting these different things here. That doesn't mean that you can't interact with them and have a fun time and do all the awesome things that you're going to get to do. It just means that we need to be fully equipped and have the tools that we need to be able to work with them. So with that, let's talk a little bit about child traumatic stress. So when children do not feel safe or protected, their risk for traumatic stress increases. We have to remember that trauma is defined by the person who experiences it. So just because Tori goes through something in her childhood and I go through the same thing in my childhood doesn't necessarily mean that I'm traumatized if she is. Does that make sense? And so everybody's going to interpret things differently. And a big part of that is because everyone's environments are different during their childhood experiences, right? So maybe whenever I went through the traumatic event, I had supportive parents there when I got home and Tori didn't. So she's going to respond to that traumatic event differently. Some of the factors that are involved in that might be cultural, environmental, generational factors that influence how we respond to trauma. And depending on our response to trauma, we call that resiliency, okay? So resiliency is basically, I'm gonna go to this next little slide here. So resiliency is basically our ability to get through a traumatic experience. So if we think about resiliency kind of like it was a seesaw or like a balance scale, okay, and we have all of the negative experiences of traumatic stress and experiences on one side of the scale, and we have the positive experiences or people in our life on the other side of the scale. When those traumatic stress events happen, when we have those positive experiences, it's going to balance the scale a little bit more and make it easier to handle, okay? Versus if we don't have those positive experiences or people in our life on one side of the scale, then when that negative stress comes, it's going to be off balance, and we're going to have maybe a different level of resiliency. Does that make sense? We're all good? Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what's called adverse childhood experiences. So you guys all should have gotten a questionnaire when you walked in, and that's the actual adverse childhood experiences, often called ACEs questionnaire. ACE is the term given to describe all types of abuse, neglect, and other traumatic experiences that occur to individuals under the age of 18. So this is a really common tool used by different teachers, doctors, therapists, people to acknowledge whether or not this individual has went through childhood traumatic stress. So as you can see in this graphic that's up on the board, I hope you can see that okay. A research study showed that almost 2/3 of adults surveyed reported at least one adverse childhood experience. So we know that what I'm talking about today isn't reduced down to one specific part of town or location or socioeconomic status, but it actually is really common amongst all different races, cultures, and walks of life. So that's really important to know. So we're going to take a small moment of time now, and I'm actually going to have you guys fill out the questionnaire that you have. These are going to be anonymous, so I don't want you to put your name on it. If you could just fill it out and fold it, and I'll collect those at the end. And the reason why I want to do this is because I want to raise your guys' own self-awareness as to maybe some of your own childhood experiences. And then we're actually going to compile the scores and reflect on that during our next training. So just take a couple minutes to do that. Okay, so if you're finishing up, go ahead and finish filling out the form, but I'm going to keep going. So there's multiple different types of ACEs, but they're categorized into 3 different categories. The first one is abuse, and then we have neglect and household dysfunction. So the types of questions that you just answered fall under this category. Let's see. So the total ACE score is determined based off how many of these 10 types of adverse experiences they were exposed to, which you'll see listed here. And so that doesn't mean that if you don't have any of these experiences, that you haven't went through something that might be considered traumatic as a child. That's just what the ACE score is basically developed based off of these specific experiences, okay? So it doesn't mean that if you haven't had these, you haven't had any kind of traumatic stress in your life. It's just covering these ones. So let's talk a little bit about ACEs across the lifespan. Our childhood experiences have a tremendous lifelong impact on our health and actually our lifespan as well. And so people with 6 or more ACEs died nearly 20 years earlier than people without ACEs scores. So that's a pretty significant number when you think about the quality of life that people experience. And so part of the concern with ACEs is that they tend to be familial and intergenerational. So what that means is that if you have someone in your family that has a higher ACE score, oftentimes you're more likely to have a higher ACE score as well, okay? That kind of goes along with the concept of like generational poverty. So if you grew up poverty, you're at a higher risk of also growing up in poverty because of the system and other things. That doesn't mean that there's not exceptions to that, or that there aren't children or adults that break that cycle, but it is more common. And so as you can see here, it kind of shows what that cycle looks like on the graphic. So some of the health risks with ACE are listed here. This graphic shows that some behavior and health risks that are concerned for those having higher ACE scores. An ACE score of 0 does not imply that an individual is not at risk for traumatic or for some of these health concerns. It just means that they're more likely to be at risk for them. And so if you have had adverse childhood experiences, some of the behavior you might see is lack of physical activity, smoking, alcoholism, drug use, or missed work. So when we talk about your experiences in your childhood, these are going to be behaviors that you could see across the lifespan. Okay, so into adolescence, adulthood, later in adulthood. Some of the physical and mental health concerns are severe obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, because people with childhood traumatic stress are often more likely to be sexually active at times, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, and broken bones. So these are just some of the things that research has uncovered with high ACE scores. And so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to talk and do like a little experiential activity of what childhood traumatic stress is like whenever you're going through that, okay? And so I'm going to give you guys, see how many people are in the room right now? Okay, so I want you to find one partner, okay, maybe the person sitting next to you, whatever works. And I'm actually going to hand out some various case scenarios that I typed up. Okay, and what we're going to do with these is we are going to read them off, and then we're going to think about how this child fits into the ACE score, into adverse childhood experiences, okay? Based off what I wrote up, how is this person experiencing trauma? So something I want to note about these is I tried to pull from realistic children that either I worked with in counseling or that I worked with here in Highcrest. So I've been volunteering in Highcrest since 2015 in various programs. And so I did tweak some of them to make them confidential, and I changed all the names. These are just people that I know in my life. They're not actual kids. But the experiences are similar, okay? So I'm going to hand these out really quick. And once you get yours, feel free to just start reading that with your partner. So again, think about what type of trauma might this person be experiencing? What in their story might be considered traumatic? Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple more minutes. What? Oh, that's their ages. Or wait, no, I forgot to delete that. That is how many something is about to happen. So I'm actually gonna go to the next one so people can't see that. Thanks. Okay. Okay, so we're actually going to transition into the next part of this activity. Thank you guys for being so excited to talk about your cases, though. That's awesome. Okay, so everybody should have been given one pair of sunglasses and one pack of stickers per partner, right? And so I want to point out that on the different scenarios that I did go ahead and highlight what their trauma triggers would be, okay? We're going to talk a little bit about what a trauma trigger is in a minute, but essentially a traumatic trigger is whenever something happens and it reminds you of that traumatic experience, and then you feel emotionally distressed because of it, okay? And so when I wrote down those are triggers that those kids have based off their different childhood experiences, okay? I also wrote two other things which will be relevant later on in the lesson time, which is what the child wants versus what the child needs, okay? A lot of the time, a child who's experiencing trauma really wants something, and we might be quick to give them what they want, when in reality, we need to focus on what they need. And we'll talk more about that later. But what we're gonna do right now, and I'm gonna try not to move around a lot because I feel stationed with the microphone, but I usually move a lot. And so I'm going to read something that I wrote up called A Day at Launch, okay? And so this was based off of some different things that I saw at launch last year. And I'm going to write this up, and I want you to be listening for, as I'm talking, whenever your person may have been triggered, okay? And so I need one person to play the role of the child, and that person's going to put on the sunglasses. So pick the person who's going to be the child. Okay. Okay. So the other person, you are going to have a sticker pack, and you represent that child's triggers. Okay? So as I'm reading, and I'm going to help you acknowledge these as I go, but as I'm reading, whenever your child is triggered, I want you to put a sticker on the sunglasses. Okay? All right, so listen closely, and I'm going to get started, okay? All right, A Day at Launch. I'm a visiting board member who has arrived at Avondale East to check out the launch program. I walk in the door and notice a police officer standing by for security at the door. Juan also passed by this officer, and he was just triggered. I walk down the hallway and veer left to find the students eating their lunch. Tyler makes his way through the line for the second time and finds out he is not allowed to be served again until everyone has went through the line. Tyler was just triggered. I stop by at each table and say hello to a few volunteers that I recognize. Kyla is sharing a story with her table when her leader gets their phone out to respond to a message. Kyla was just triggered. I also notice there is someone with a nice camera walking around capturing various moments. Josh was just triggered. After lunch, everyone heads towards their classroom. The middle schoolers head to the media center, which is up the stairs and past the officer. Juan is triggered again. I decide to make my way down the hall to visit the pre-K classroom. Sierra is cheerfully sitting on a leader's lap when the leader begins to stand up. Sierra is triggered. After noticing that Sierra looks sad after they got up, the leader tries to cheer her up by tickling her on the side. Sierra is triggered again. Sierra screams loudly at the leader and is corrected. Sierra is triggered. I decide to make my way to the 4th grade room where I find Kyla arguing with a peer. The child had taken the Play-Doh that Kyla had stopped using. Kyla was triggered. And Kyla is asked to step out into the hallway where she hears a preschooler crying. Kyla is triggered again. As I walk down the hallway, I find Juan sitting by himself. I find out his group is outside doing an activity by the playground. To get to the playground, they had to walk by 2 police cars. Juan was triggered. And once they were outside, there was a sound of sirens in the distance. Juan was triggered. Juan seemed upset, so I tried to understand what was happening by asking him some questions. I asked him why he decided to come inside instead of stay on the playground. I asked him what they were doing outside, if anyone knew where he was, and if he was allowed to be inside the whole time. That many questions from a stranger triggered Juan. Since he didn't seem to want to talk with me, I went outside to check things out. The middle schoolers were in a large group, Josh was triggered, doing some sort of icebreaker game. They had to make a human knot by touching hands, Josh was triggered, and try to untangle themselves. The leader was attempting to give directions, but it was difficult to hear over everyone talking. Josh was triggered. The other leader was starting to take pictures of the game. Josh was triggered. When Josh walked off and sat on a swing by himself. After observing, I went inside and found the high schoolers in the kitchen working on a cooking activity. Everyone seemed to be having a fun time. Tyler asked when they would have bathroom breaks next, but wasn't given an answer. Tyler was triggered. Instead, he was asked to crack an egg into the bowl, but crushed the whole egg in the mix. Another student stated, "How do you not know how to crack an egg?" Tyler's triggered. In which other students began laughing. Tyler's triggered. The leader ignored this and asked a different student to crack the egg instead. Tyler then flipped the mixing bowl and was told to get out of the room. Tyler's triggered. More students laughed. Tyler's triggered. And he walked over to a shut closed door. Tyler's triggered. And kicked it. I stepped away from the incident, and as I walked back to the hallway, I heard another student crying. It was nap time for kindergarten. Sierra's triggered. And Sierra was crying outside the classroom door. On my way over to her, I peeked in the 4th grade room and noticed 2 leaders performing a skit. During the skit, they began to playfully argue. Kyla's triggered. Kyla stopped watching, got up from her seat, and began playing with other toys in the room. She was asked to stop playing and return to her place. Kyla's triggered, but grew upset. It was now time for the day to wrap up, and the entire launch group was asked to step outside for a photo. They walk out the front doors past the police officer, Juan's triggered, and stand in front of the school. There's a lack of instruction, Josh is triggered, and some of the students are snickering to themselves and looking towards Tyler. Tyler's triggered. Kyla is trying to ask the photographer if she can take the picture, but he is not acknowledging her. Kyla's triggered. Cars drive by, Juan's triggered, and one of the leaders quickly picks up Sierra without asking to pose for the photo. Sierra's triggered. The photo is taken, Josh is triggered, and everyone is sent home from the day. I was really impressed with the program. Okay, so raise your hand if you were Josh. Okay, I need one Josh to come up. Did anybody run out of stickers? Okay, good. You had enough stickers. That doesn't matter. You both can come if you want. Okay, so Josh, come up, and then give your paper. Sorry. Yeah. Or you can. Other Josh, you can come too. You come too. Yeah, you come too. I have a job for you. Okay, I need you to stand right here. Okay, if you were
I got 7.
7. How many do you have?
A bunch.
Okay.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
All right. I don't know if you counted right. What does it say on there? 7. Okay, Josh had extra triggers that day apparently, but that's okay. So I'm gonna have you stand over by him. Okay, raise your hand if you were Juan. Okay, I need a Juan to come up and then another Juan to come up. I need 2 Juans.
Team Juan.
Okay, if you were Sierra, I need 2 Sierras. I need 2 Tylers and 2 Kylas. Yeah. So we got Josh, Juan, Tyler. Okay. You guys can stand. Yeah, kind of. Oh, that's fine. We'll curve. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do now is 2 Tylers. Raise your hand if you're Tyler up here.
Tyler's. I'm Tyler.
Yeah, you can come too. Okay. 1, 2.
Who's the Sierra? I'm the Sierra. Okay.
Okay. We'll figure it out as we go. Okay, so what we're going to do, this is how many triggers I read off. I have Kyla 6, Tyler 8, Sierra 5, Josh 6, and Juan 7. Some of you may have heard more than that, and that's okay, all right? But what we're going to do is I'm going to have each person go through. One of you put your sunglasses on, it doesn't matter. Another person's going to read what that character was about, since you guys didn't get to hear everything, okay? So, a reader and a wearer. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Josh, and I'm 11 years old. I'm going to be in sixth grade next year, and I'm nervous about going to middle school. I was adopted from China when I was 4. I don't remember anything about being in China, but my parents told me I was dropped off at the orphanage when I was 9 months old. They also said we can visit one day. I have 2 sisters who are 14 and 17, but they weren't adopted. They are nice to me, but I don't hang out with them very much. I don't like the rest of my family, and sometimes that makes me feel sad, especially because my mom hangs pictures of us all over the house. I don't really like it when people make me do things while others watch. I get overwhelmed easy around other kids and like to accomplish things myself. You should also know that my dog passed away 6 months ago, and he was my best friend. I felt like he was the only one who understood me. I am excited to come to launch because I want to learn more about science and gaming.
Awesome. And what are your triggers?
Triggers are group activities, not understanding instructions, someone touching me, large groups of people, dogs barking, people taking my photo.
Okay.
And
Yeah, you can keep going.
And what Josh wants is to be left alone and not talked to. And what Josh needs is healthy attachment and social skills.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Okay. Whoever's next, you guys can go sit down now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Juan and I'm 14 years old. I'll be an 8th grader next year. I don't really like school because English is my second language. My family is from Mexico, but I've lived here my whole life. I have 2 younger sisters. About 3 months ago, my family was in a bad car accident because my dad ran a red light. My mom hit her head really hard and was bleeding, but she's okay now. I had a broken arm and both my sisters were okay but scared. My dad got into trouble after the accident and they found out he is not a legal citizen. He was deported back to Mexico last month. I really miss him and I know that it's my responsibility to take care of my family. I'm worried because we live in a neighborhood with lots of shootings and robberies, but my dad isn't here to keep us safe. I'm going to mow lawns this summer to make extra money. Maybe I can buy us a new house somewhere else. I'm excited for lunch because we get to learn skills to help us as we grow up. Juan's triggers include police officers or authority in uniform, not having a seatbelt on, cars driving by, sirens, someone asking me lots of questions, and nighttime. Juan wants to protect himself and his family, but he needs to feel safe and supported.
Awesome. Thank you, Juan. You guys can move this way. Okay, whoever's next.
Hello, my name is Tyler and I am 16 years old. I'm supposed to be a junior next year but didn't pass all of my classes. I've been to a lot of different schools and homes because of foster care. I got taken away when I was 10, but my dad is trying to get me back. I don't remember a lot about being a kid other than always having people in our house and not being allowed to go in certain rooms. If we went in those rooms, we would get hit or kicked by someone. I got taken away after my dad went to jail for drugs and my mom kept forgetting to feed us. I used to get made fun of at school for smelling bad too. That's why I started to stick up for myself, but now I get suspended a lot for fights. I don't really want to be at lunch, but my foster parents are making me go. My triggers are people making fun of me, someone laughing at me, shut doors, not having enough to eat at lunch or snack time, being told to get out and not knowing the plan. I want people to be afraid of me and I need someone to be an unconditional friend.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kyla and I am 8 years old. I am going into the 4th grade next year, but I'm a little nervous because I can't read good. I have a lot of siblings, some of them I've never met before, but I live with 10 of them. My oldest sister will be in high school next year and my new brother was just born 3 months ago. I'm in the middle and sometimes feel like no one notices me. I don't know who my dad is, but my mom lets me call her boyfriend Dad. He has lived with us for 3 years, but sometimes goes away for a while. I don't like it when they fight and hit each other. I usually cover my ears and scream. My favorite thing to do is watch Netflix with my sister. We like to watch Criminal Minds and Game of Thrones. Sometimes my mom has to go to work and we have to take care of ourselves. I do a good job, but when the new baby cries, I get angry. I can't wait to come to launch and make new friends. Kyla's triggers include people not listening to me, people arguing or disagreeing, when someone touches or takes my stuff, babies crying, not being able to do something on my own. She wants to do things her way and have everyone watch, and she needs healthy attention and consistency.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have another Sierra? You're Sierra, right? Who else was Sierra? We didn't have any more Sierras? Oh, I'll wear the sunglasses.
You're gonna wear sunglasses? Okay, there you are. There you are. I know. Hello, my name is Sierra. I'm 5 years old and I'm going into kindergarten next year and I'm excited to meet my new teacher and I'm excited for snack time. I just moved in with my grandma and grandpa because my dad was hurting me and my mom is finding a job. My dad liked to sleep in my bed sometimes and play games and he would give me prizes when I would follow his rules. When I tried to play the same games with my friends at recess, I got into trouble. Then I had to talk to another teacher and I didn't get to go home. I stayed the night in an office and I started to live with my grandma and grandpa. I do like it here because we have lots of animals and I'm very excited to come to launch because the leaders are all really nice and let me sit on their laps all day. Sierra's triggers include getting corrected when people tickle her, nap time, certain physical touch. And Sierra wants physical attention or physical affection 24/7 on her terms. Sierra needs someone to teach her good touch versus bad touch, consent, and boundaries.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Okay, so how was that? Give me a little feedback. What was that like for you guys?
Eye-opening.
Yeah. Definitely.
See the effects of trauma was different on everyone.
Yeah. So a couple things I want to point out. First thing is, the reason why I had you put stickers on the sunglasses, some of you went around, you didn't follow the rules, but the reasons why I had you put stickers on the sunglasses is because when a child goes through their day and they've experienced traumatic stress and they don't know how to deal with it, their perspective is going to change. Okay, they're not going to be seeing activities or programs or different things the same way as kids who aren't being triggered, or who hasn't had that experience. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is the scenario that I wrote up was a little bit exaggerated because for the sake of this activity, but also some of those triggers are very real for kids because a lot of the times the things that might trigger a child might seem really mundane and meaningless to us, but it means something to them. And that's important to remember. Just because it doesn't cause you fear doesn't mean it's not causing them fear. Also, I intentionally put some really poor leadership, not leadership, but volunteer intervention in this scenario because I wanted to point out how sometimes our behavior does influence or can increase a child's triggers, okay? That doesn't mean that we're gonna do it perfectly and we don't expect you to. And sometimes we really don't know what the child's triggers are, okay? The language I used on this was almost as if the child acknowledged what their triggers were, but probably 90% of these kids aren't going to know what their triggers actually are or even know what that language is. And so that's really important for you to know. Did anyone have any questions or anything that came up that seemed out of the ordinary or puzzling? Oh, okay, yeah.
Something that I've learned is that when you're coming from a background that has less trauma, you're walking into a situation probably dealing with it in a way that you're completely blind to these triggers and things that I would see as a perfectly reasonable response, like from authority or as someone
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to be talking a lot about application too. Okay, so this was kind of the example I wanted to give you guys as to what that's like in the eyes of a child. But next, we're actually going to spend some time talking about trauma in the brain and how that affects their brain, and then the application piece, like Jimmy Ann mentioned. And so I love talking about the brain. I think it is super fascinating. The way that God made it, the way He created it and designed it is super complex. And so to best understand how trauma affects the brain, we have to understand some basic functions of it first. And so here is a picture of, you definitely cannot read that, I apologize, but here is a picture of the left brain versus the right brain and the various functions. The right brain hemisphere, often referred to as our creative side. I don't know if you guys have heard that, like, oh, they're a right brain person or they're a left brain person. Some of the functions of the right brain or right hemisphere is it balances our creativity and artistic tendencies. So that allows us for free-flowing thoughts, feelings, reactions, and insights to be expressed and experienced. Provides the avenue through which we experience emotions. That's a really important part, right? That's the part of our brain that we experience emotions. When we listen to feel-good music, we are addressing this particular area of our brains, right? That we're receiving something into our brain and then we're experiencing emotions based off that. It also contains the construct for our imagination. Thinks more in pictures than words and focuses on the big picture. That's basically what that means. Now, the left hemisphere, often referred to as our logical side, organizes memory and problem solving. It creates symbols, connects personal experience to culturally shared meaning. So that might be something like community events, worship, gatherings, school functions, right? Those things become meaningful because of the left brain and the left side. It focuses on logical thought and processes, and it's more focused on words and details. So it's kind of like the creative, imaginative, emotion side, and then you have the like logical, problem-solving, thinking side. So when trauma, so let's say like an assault takes place, it's an experience that resists logic, and we lose our ability to process what just happens. So essentially what happens is when logic is unable to explain what just happened, right? So when if I was walking home and somebody approached me and mugged me, that wasn't something that I was planning to happen on my walk home, right? So then that part of my brain, that logical part that's trying to process that, essentially deactivates. And then the right side of our brain, that emotion part, overactivates. And whenever that overactivates, it causes an overabundance of imagined circumstances which are unable to be processed by the left side of the brain. So there starts to be this imbalance that happens in our brain. So to give you an example of what that looks like in childhood, this is a PET scan of 2 different children's brains. The first scan, the one that you'll see on the left, is the healthy brain, and that shows a brain with high activity. So the temporal lobes, which are the 2 different things that are circled here, acknowledge that the child had healthy stimulation in its external environment. So this child was most likely being nurtured, having needs met, and wasn't having any kind of adverse childhood experiences. The second brain is that of an orphan who was institutionalized shortly after birth. The lack of activity in the temporal lobes here, as you can see, there's almost no color at all, right? So the lack of activity here is because the child was robbed of early attachment and trust. And so this means that the child's ability to regulate emotions and receive input from the senses is essentially non-existent. And so that ability to problem solve and do those different things is not there. It's kind of like whenever our brain isn't fed the right things that we need during those first 3 years of life, it's kind of like not receiving the proper nutrients the first three years of life. So obviously, if you aren't getting any protein at all for the first 3 years of your life, that's going to drastically affect your physical health. So when you're not getting any attachment or affection your first three years of life, that's dramatically affecting you as well. So as you can see here, trauma can literally rewire the brain. And so as I'm talking up here about all of these different experiences and trauma in the brain, it's not just talk. Like, this is science, and it's proven, and it's very real, and it's not going to change or be altered overnight. So experiences of connection and nurture define how brain cells connect and create pathways. So that's the purpose of nurturing. And without that, they're not being created properly. So this graphic shows a variety of trauma symptoms experienced by someone who has a history of trauma. Trauma symptoms can present themselves consistently or impulsively. So maybe someone never ever likes to be touched, and that's a traumatic symptom that they have because of adverse childhood experience. Or maybe just sometimes they don't feel like being touched, okay? I have a history of childhood trauma, and for me, it's up and down. Sometimes because of the progress that I've made and I've worked through various things, sometimes I can go a really long period of time and I'll be doing fine, and other times I get triggered, and that's just a part of reality. So for these kids that we're going to be working with in the program, they obviously don't have the brain of an adult yet or the ability to process those different things, and so you're probably going to be seeing a lot more of the consistent symptoms. Trauma symptoms also often present differently in children based off the stage of development. I'm not actually going to spend a lot of time diving into that because I think there's more pertinent information, but I am going to give you a handout before you go that kind of breaks that up to what you might see based off different age groups. Let's see. Also, I have here trauma symptoms often overlap with other mental illness. That's important to note because I think at times we can see a child's behavior and we pick our brain and we're like, oh, they're like ADHD, or yeah, they're super depressed, or they're super anxious. But actually a lot of the times the symptoms are overlapping. And so with that, I just want to encourage you guys, like, don't play the doctor. Like, don't assume that you know what's going on. I can't even do that as someone who does this for a living, right? There's a lot of information that's collected to actually diagnose someone. And so with that, also, don't assume that because someone's experiencing something or reacting in a way that is similar to trauma that they've had trauma, because that might not be the case either. We just want to make sure that we're prepared to handle it as it presents itself. So a little bit more about the brain here. Two different parts. There's the learning brain and the survival brain. Okay, so that's basically kind of, again, going back to those different parts of the brain. And I just think this is a really easy way to break it down for you guys to understand. And so the learning brain, which is the thinking and feeling brain, is kind of like what we would call your upstairs brain. So if this is your brain, this is this part of the brain, okay? So lower brain, upstairs brain, okay? The upstairs brain is more complex, regulates emotions, develops skills, is open to new information, and comfortable with doubt. So those are some of the functions of the learning brain. The surviving brain, or the downstairs brain, it's always developed first. So it's the first part of your brain that's developed. It keeps us alive. It is constantly scanning the environment, and it's often overused during trauma. So if you think about a child who is experiencing a lack of safety growing up, their surviving brain is going to be on way longer than a child who's having their needs met. I keep saying needs met, but their needs met. And so that's important to recognize, because when a child goes through complex trauma, their survival brain is often on for long periods of time. And the longer the survival brain is on, the harder it is to come out of it. And so a term that's often used in therapy is when a child flips their lid, right? So if this is their upstairs brain and this is their downstairs brain, when that child gets triggered, it flips their lid, okay? And they're only functioning out of their survival brain, not their learning brain. And they actually can't get back to their learning brain until their lid goes back down and they're re-regulated, okay? And so for some children, it kind of feels like it's going like this all the time, and they're never fully re-regulated and able to learn. So with that, it takes extreme effort for children with traumatic stress to operate out of learning brain. And I like to use the analogy of someone trying to push a rock up a hill. So if the rock represents the traumatic stress, then the bigger the stress, the bigger the rock. So the more traumatic stress that they've experienced, the bigger the rock's going to be. With trauma, stress is more intense, so any little stress makes the rock grow bigger. So basically, I get triggered because there's a closed door, and then my rock gets bigger. Or I get triggered because someone's not paying attention to me, and then my rock grows bigger. And because trauma threats or triggers are often ambiguous situations, like situations we wouldn't even think would be a threat, the rock stays big all the time for some kids. So how do we reduce the stress? I know I've been talking a lot about all the information, but we want to know what to do about it. So healthy attachment, I don't know if my link's going to work here. Let me do this. Healthy attachment is the best way to navigate trauma. See if this will open. Does sound work on this, Cheryl?
I tried to kill myself with a bottle of pills.
Does.
And the fact of the matter is I trusted no one. And looking back, I guess how could I? From the time my parents left me, to the time another foster kid raped me, to the time I was bullied so bad, I genuinely could not fathom a world where I could trust anybody. So fast forward, here I am, 14 years old, and entering my umpteenth foster home. I was a veteran at this whole sort of getting kicked out of one home, moved to the next. You meet these people who were like literally complete and total strangers 10 minutes ago, who are now apparently your mom and dad. You know, kids don't take candy from strangers, just move in with them. So I'm sitting in the van, in the driveway of this next home, and that's when I see Rodney. He's standing up there on the front porch, and immediately I notice, this is a large fella. He's 6'5", he's 350 pounds, and as a 14-year-old boy, I couldn't help but notice, when he's turned to the side like that, he's shaped like a lowercase b. It's amusing now, but in the moment it was tactical. Maybe that's how I could get kicked out of this home. Maybe I could get under his skin about his weight. So I move in with him. I'm being obnoxious, I'm being ungrateful, I'm being just downright rude and mean, I'm setting things on fire, and 3 years later, I can't shake this guy. Rodney won't kick me out. So I step up my game. I go to the local bank in town. I open up a checking account. I put about $90 in there. Then I proceed to write $10,000 worth of checks. Obviously, checks bouncing one after the next after the next. One check that bounced was for my car insurance. I'm going down the road speeding, Stillwater, Oklahoma, 88 miles an hour. No car insurance, no driver's license. I get pulled over, handcuffed, thrown in the back of a cop car, and sent to jail. I call Rodney. Like, Rodney, I'm in Stillwater, I'm in jail, I'll tell you the whole thing when you get here. Can you please come bail me out tonight? He said, I will come bail you out, but not till tomorrow. Rodney frustratingly believes sometimes one of the most loving things you could do for a kid was allow them to sit in either the success of their wonderful choice or the stupidity of their foolish choice. Next morning, he comes, bails me out, exactly as promised. We have a long, very awkward car ride home. No one says anything. We get back to the house. He's like, we need to sit down and talk. And I knew this moment had finally come. So Rodney, his wife, sent me down to give me the talk I've had a dozen times. He looks in my eyes and says, son, you can keep causing problems. You can keep trying to mess up. You can keep pushing us away. You can keep trying to get us to kick you out of here, but you've got to get it through your thick head, son. We don't see you as a problem. We see you as an opportunity. And in that moment, all my skepticism came to the surface. And I thought, what a cheesy, stupid thing to say to a 17-year-old kid. But then I was overwhelmed with the reality that this guy actually meant it. He didn't see what I was, what was on the surface. The obnoxious kid, the ungrateful kid, the kid getting suspended. He saw what I could be. It was genuinely my turning point. Statistically, I am supposed to be dead, in jail, or homeless. But because of one caring adult. I'm not a statistic. Every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. Every child who winds up doing well has had at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult. My friend and mentor Reggie Joyner taught me to think about it this way. In this jar are 936 marbles. Each one of these marbles represents a single week from the birth of a kid until that kid turns 18 years old. So, if you know a 9-year-old, you've only got 468 marbles, or weeks, however you want to look at it, remaining. You know a 16-year-old? You got 104 marbles remaining. right here, we are looking at time. In fact, you're looking at all the time or all of the weeks you have left to influence this kid, or this kid before they turn 18 and begin making critical life decisions without your presence. The difference between a statistic and a success story is you.
Okay. So, we've been talking about all of the bad parts about trauma, obviously. Let me open this back up. Thought we should give ourselves a little bit of hope, too. So, I want you to turn to your neighbor, and I want you to say, you can do this. You can do this. Turn to your other neighbor and say, you can do this. Okay, awesome. So, guys, I know that this is a lot, and we can feel like, what the heck? If trauma literally changes the brain, what are we supposed to do, right? But there is progress, and there is solution, and there is growth possible, okay? And so, I want to just read this little quote that I found in a research article. It says, the single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. These relationships provide the personalized responsiveness, scaffolding, and protection that buffer children from developmental disruption. They also build key capacities such as the ability to plan, monitor, and regulate behavior that enable children to respond adaptively to adversity and thrive. And so what we know from that is that that's the role you guys have this summer, right? Even though you're going to have a short amount of time with these kids, you still get to choose to be that one caring and supportive and trusting adult in their life. So when all else fails, just tell yourself that, because there will be times that you feel like, I have no idea what to do, right? But it's okay to know I showed up today for this kid. And so for the remainder of this training, we have almost an hour left. We will be addressing the 3 values of TBRI. If you've heard of TBRI, can you raise your hand? Okay, so a good chunk of you. So TBRI stands for Trust-Based Relational Interventions. It's a model developed by Karen Purvis, and it is awesome. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the 3 values of that, which are empower, connect, and correct. And that's kind of the framework for TBRI, which is often used with kids who have experienced trauma. So, first step is empower. So a child from hard places or a traumatic environment needs empowered. This happens through a safe and nurturing relationship. Their capacity to trust has been dramatically altered due to the effects trauma has on the brain. We can bring balance, kind of like we were talking about with the resiliency, right? Or us bringing those positive experiences creates the balance by providing positive resources. The most important piece of approaching trauma is creating a safe environment. So, this is really important. Trust is earned through felt safety, okay? When the child feels safe, not you knowing that the child is safe, but the child feeling safe. Or not you knowing that the child is safe, but the child feeling safe, okay? So even though we know that the child is going to be served a snack and they're going to get fed and they're protected because the police officers are in the building and we have a planned schedule for them and we know when they're getting picked up, just because you know all of those things does not mean that the child is safe or feels safe, right? We know that they're safe, but they might not feel safe. And so a couple ways to do that, time checks such as 5 minutes left until we transition might bring safety, helping them understand what the plan is, share that information with them. Something I want to address here is I don't know what Launch's policy is, that they'll talk about all of the policies and things in a little bit, but in regards to like photo taking and posting pictures, but regardless, I just want to address here that you really need to be mindful of that, because when we talk about establishing safety for children, and these kids, whether they've only known you for a day or a week or a month, or they remember you from last summer, they're not going to have that consistent relationship with you most likely. And so for a stranger, or seemingly a stranger, to just be taking pictures of them all the time, is that teaching them safety? Like, would we want another person coming into our program and doing that, or then to go to a park and allow someone to take their pictures a whole bunch? Probably not, right? Especially when it comes to posting. So when it comes time to like actually post pictures, are we thinking through, what would this child's parents think if I posted this picture with them? right? What would this child think if they knew I was posting these pictures of them? And so I know that we love to share about our relationships and different people, but I just really, really want to acknowledge that this is really important, you guys, for safety. So if the child's basic needs are not being met, then they're not going to have the capacity to build relationships. So this is a picture of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Basic needs are the two bottom parts of the pyramid, which basically mean in order to achieve these different level of needs, these are going to have to be met. And so it's my understanding that Launch will be serving lunch and a snack. Is that right, Cheryl? Each day. So if the kids ask about that, just reassure them, like, yes, we're having a snack time. We're going to have snack time every single day. So they know and they start to build trust that that need is going to be met for them. This communicates consistent safety and allows them to be trust-driven rather than fear-driven. Because you can imagine, I don't know about you guys, but I get like so hangry. The most hangry when I haven't had dinner. So when I have to work an hour later and it's like 8:30 and I haven't had dinner, I start to literally behave and think and feel differently. So for a child who goes through that, who isn't getting fed or they don't know when their next meal is going to be, they're obviously going to behave differently. Along with nutrition, bathroom and water breaks are a significant part of empowering. If the kid needs to use the bathroom, let them use the bathroom. If they need to get a drink of water, let them get a drink of water. Those are basic needs that they need to understand can be met. And I understand that there might be some kids who take advantage of that. And like every time it's time for reading, they're like, I need to use the bathroom again, right? Or right after they got back from the bathroom. So that would be a really helpful time to either address like, well, we just met that need a minute ago. Do you need to go again? And then if it becomes a habit, address that after the need is met. Hey, what's going on? You need to get a drink of water every 60 seconds. Like, do we need to get you a cup of water? And just talk about that, but making sure the need's still met. Additionally, I want you guys to be mindful of the summer heat, not only for the kids, but for yourselves as well. All right, so the heat affects everyone very differently. And this might make the children feel more vulnerable or exposed or irritable, all those things that summer heat does to us. I know you guys will be inside most of the time, but that's important to be aware of. So try to meet that need as best you can. The next point is connect. And so this is probably one of the like really crucial parts of the Empower, Connect, and Correct, because if a child isn't able to properly connect with us, then we're not going to have necessarily the trust or the authority to correct them well, right? And so connection is really important. The first part of connection is awareness. And so watching their body language for information. When Jimmy Ann said, sometimes you just got to stop what you think is the right answer and just observe and just look for what they might be needing. That's kind of what she was talking about, is awareness. This will help you get to know the child better and connect with them better. So if you take time, instead of trying to swoop in and save or fix or correct, and just take a step back and say, okay, what's going on with them right now? What am I seeing? Oh, I saw this last week, or I've seen this behavior every single day. That's going to be feeding you information. Also, you're going to want to look for eye contact when communicating with a child. Saying something like, can I see your eyes? And asking is a really simple way to connect with them. Okay, and this goes for like little preschoolers all the way up to high schoolers. I still tell my high school clients, like, can I see your eyes? And that's an immediate connection that can happen. And I would say like 85 to 90% of the time, they really do give you their eyes, and they're hungry for that connection. And then the other part of awareness is self-awareness. So I would say that in whether it be you're helping, volunteering at a program, or you're talking to a friend, or you're processing something with your family, like self-awareness is one of the most important parts of helping other people. Because if we don't know what's going on in ourselves, then how are we supposed to truly know what's going on with them, right? And so making sure that you're taking time to check in with yourself, figure out, okay, how am I feeling right now? What's going on in my body right now? Do I need a drink of water? Do I need a bathroom break? Do I just need like a time out for a second? Being aware of yourself is really important. I like to use the example of like going on an airplane, and they always tell you, make sure you put your oxygen mask on before you put anyone else's on. Okay, that's going to be crucial for you guys this summer. Okay, holding the space. This is a term that basically means allowing people to find their own truths from within. And so it's important to stay curious, again, observing with the kids and not jump to rescuing their problem. Okay, so part of that is holding the space for them. It basically means allowing time to listen to them and be mindful of your own body language and your tone of voice. So if a child is upset or something's going on and I'm like up here looking at them, I'm not holding the space, right? But when I get down on their level and I acknowledge my own tone of voice, then that's a little bit different, a lot bit different. Okay. Good touch versus bad touch. Who's heard this terminology before? Oh, right on. Okay, a lot of you have. So how I'm going to explain this is that many children that have experienced trauma, specifically in the form of neglect or abuse, need help with physical boundaries. Okay, that's really, really important, is to help them understand what do healthy physical boundaries look like, especially with people older than them or adults and peers. Helping them understand the difference between good touch and bad touch, or healthy touch and unhealthy touch, is going to be a really awesome role that you guys get to play this summer. So good touch equals appropriate ways of connecting with consent. Consent's really important, right? So we ask, so such as high fives, fist bumps, and gentle hugs. Okay, so if a kid kind of looks hesitant and you're trying to like go up and give them a high five, like just ask, give them that permission. Hey, can I have a high five? Or if they don't want to give you, can I have a hug and they don't want to give you a hug? Can I trade that for a high five? Can I trade that for a fist bump? That's helping teach them consent. Bad touch is inappropriate ways of making physical connection. So that could be anything from hitting, biting, kicking, slapping, pinching, or inappropriate touch, obviously. And so if the child decides, a good example of that is if you ask a child for a high five and then everyone has been through this before, they like hit your hand as hard as they can, right? And we kind of laugh that off, but we don't want them high-fiving their friends that way, right? And so we're like, oh man, that kind of hurt. Can you try again with more gentle touch, right? And so allowing them, and that's teaching them again, that good touch versus bad touch. And so with the physical boundaries, you are responsible for modeling this. Okay, many of these kids do not have someone modeling that at home, like I said. And so if you allow them to lay in your lap or sit on you or push physical boundaries, then you are showing them that it's a safe way of interacting. Okay, obviously this is going to look different across age groups. So there's probably going to be more physical touch with preschoolers than there is going to be with fifth graders, right? But it's still important to model that. And part of that is you guys acknowledging and modeling for them whenever you don't want to be touched. If you don't want somebody like all up in your business, like tell them like, no thanks, I need some space. And that's okay to do because they need someone to model that for them. I know that it feels really good whenever children love on us and they like want to be our best friend and want to sit with us every single day. But it is so important to make sure that we're, again, modeling those healthy boundaries because they might not get it anywhere else. And so if that means like small things like don't let kids lay in your lap, like that could be really unhealthy for them at other places, okay? Not allowing them to like sit on you the whole time or really maybe at all, especially depending on the age group. Little ones, again, that's probably a different story, but I would say anything from like kindergarten up, like teach them to sit in their own space, teach them to sit in their own spot. Okay, and again, I know that it's really hard because we love to be loved on by the kids, but we're here to help them, not us. We're filling their needs, not ours. Okay, does anyone have questions about that? Okay. Let's see if I had anything else. Okay, give voice. Just some different ideas, and these might be good ones for you guys to write down if you're taking notes. Some examples of give voice is saying things like, can you tell me with your words and not your actions? Or can you tell me with your words and not your behavior? I need you to use your words, please. Would you like to ask for a compromise? And can I trade you for a hug, high five, or fist bump? Okay. Those are also good things to do if a kid like pushes or does something else or is trying to get in line and pushes you out of the way, you know, asking if they can trade for another way of connecting. Okay. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but I did stick playful engagement on here. And so just want to emphasize that we need to remember that these are kids we're working with. So it's okay to have fun in the way that we direct them and re-engage them. So it's okay to be like, are you asking or telling? Like, what's going on? Like, I remember I had a girl at the after school program that came, and she was the oldest one there, and she kind of would get a little bossy. And at one point I just said, Khadijah, are you the boss or am I? And then she looked at me and she kind of smiled, and then she was good and she redirected and she started listening again. Okay, and so that was like a fun, playful way of engaging her. Okay. Okay, now we're going to jump into correcting. So when we say correct, we mean less punishment and more shaping. Okay, so that is kind of going to be, and I think Andrea gave you a handout on this and is going to talk maybe a little bit more about it, but punishment is often counterproductive and implement shame to kids. Okay, so putting someone in the corner and leaving them there is going to make them feel more shame and less connection. So 3 strategies for correcting are redos, compromises, and choices. Redos can be offered if a child's behavior is not appropriate. And so that would be something like a child does something and that didn't meet the expectations of the classroom. And so, hey, can you try that again? Can we have a redo on that? That can be something that you can teach the child to ask for. Can I have a redo? And you can also encourage them to do. A child can ask for a compromise if they do not like the rules, activity, or situation. And so maybe they don't want to go outside because it's too hot outside. And so, hey, can I have a compromise? So giving them space to ask for that and working together as a team to develop those. And then giving choices as much as possible to help the child feel a level of control and avoid power struggles. Okay, we've all been in that place probably, whether it be with a sibling or a cousin or a kid we worked with where there's that power struggle and they want to be in charge, but we're actually in charge. And so giving them choices that you're the one that's establishing, but they kind of feel like they have control because they get to pick is really smart. It also gives the child responsibility, which is good. Showing no threat. This is really hard, and I could share an example of Andrea. Andrea and I are youth group leaders with middle schoolers at the church here, and we took some girls on a fall retreat, and they kept us up all night. We're in this little cabin with them, and they were like talking and having the best time, but super loud and would not go to sleep. So we got very limited sleep. So obviously I'm running on like empty the next day, right? And so we were supposed to sit down for our small group time. And one girl in particular was being just really ornery and was like sliding down the stairs and not listening. And I asked her multiple times. I tried redirecting her. I have all the right answers, right? Because I'm a therapist and I'm like, I know what to do. But I just lost it. I lost it. I got up, yelled at her to get up. And then she got triggered and it was really bad. It was this huge power struggle. And then I cried for like an hour. Okay. And so, fun fact, this will happen. This might happen. Okay. But we want to do our best to not show our anger or frustration or disappointment to the child, okay? So reflecting on that experience, what I should have done is I should have been practicing self-awareness and been like, I need to take 5. I need to step aside, take a deep breath, and come back and figure out why is she doing this? Because every behavior has meaning. But instead, I was really reactive. So if I'm not going to be able to talk to this child, especially with some of the older kids, I'm not going to be able to talk to this child until I calm down, then allow yourself to calm down because we don't want to express those things to them. We need to be giving them unconditional support. Relate. So even though you may not understand what the child's going through, like you've never been through something that they're talking about or acted the way that they're acting, you can try to relate to what they're going through by identifying an emotion that's similar to theirs. And so saying something like, I felt angry before too, or sometimes I feel left out, helps name the emotion and normalize feelings. And so that's also going to help them de-escalate because they realize, oh, I'm not the only one that's going through this or has felt this way. Positive reinforcement is helpful also as it encourages the child's healthy behavior. So when you do see a child doing something well, praise them for that. You can never praise, well, maybe you can praise a child too much, but it's really important to praise them and be excited for the things that they're doing. And so saying things like good eyes, good asking, good touch, all those little things are going to be really important. Okay, and then last part is just remember, like I said, you are the model for the kids. So during the summer, are you guys all going to be volunteers there, Monday through Wednesday? Everybody? Awesome. So for the most part. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm sorry. And so you're going to be those consistent volunteers and people in their life for the summer. Okay, so it's going to be your job to be implementing these things I'm talking about. And so I say that because when they're in the classroom and the teacher's up front, don't expect the teacher to stop and address the child's behavior, because they're going to be disrupting the entire lesson to stop and try to address one person's situation. Okay, this is why you guys are here, and that's why you've been asked to be a part of Launch. And so I really, like, if I'm at Launch on Thursday and I walk into a classroom and I see a child doing something in the corner and like having a negative behavior, and you guys are like over painting your face, I'm going to call you out on that, because I know that I'm equipping you with the things that you need. Okay, and it's not the teacher's job. I will kindly call you out on that. Okay. All right, so a couple more things and then we're almost done. This is an example of an ideal response. So this is the kind of response we want to have to the kids when it comes to correcting. And the acronym here is immediate, direct, efficient, action-based, and leveled at the behavior. So immediate means to respond within seconds if possible. Okay, the quicker the response, the quicker it will register. And so literally as soon as you see a child doing a behavior, a child pushes someone in line, address it right away. Can you try that again? Right, addressing it right away, getting on their level. Direct is engaging directly with eye contact, giving them undivided attention, and bringing them nearer to you in proximity. So we don't want to be shouting at kids down the hallway, right? We want to try to get as close and direct to them as possible. This is important when it comes to like getting on their level. Think about what it feels like whenever you get in trouble and someone's standing over you. That's not fun. And so getting on their level is important. Efficient is using a measured response that is equal in intensity to the challenge. So you will have an opportunity to establish this together as a team. We're going to talk about how different circumstances or different levels of behavior are going to take different responses. And I'm going to give some examples on a handout and you guys can collaborate on that. But making sure that if a child's like fidgeting in his seat, that you're not responding really intensely to that, when he might just be like, hey, like, can we try to sit still, wiggle worm, or something like that. Action-based is give an opportunity for a redo the right way, lead them through a real redo if necessary. So some kids literally might need you to model this for them. Like they might need to understand what is the right way. This is what I do at home. This is what I do at school. This is what all my friends do. So modeling that if you need to. And when they've changed the behavior, make sure you praise them for that for the appropriate response. This one's really significant because our body memorizes what behavior feels like. So when we allow them to do a redo, we're actually creating body memory for that action. And so that's really important. And the last one is leveled at the behavior. Make it clear that you are responding to the behavior and not the child. And so never reject the child as a person, only respond to the behavior. Every behavior has an unmet need behind it, like I said. And so getting frustrated at a child and saying something like, oh, I can't handle you, like that's addressing the child, and that is going to create shame. Okay, so making sure that we're always bringing it back to behavior. And with the ideal response, something that's really important is that we want to make sure that we're always requiring respect and expecting respect from them. So if you're interacting with them, don't feel like, oh, well, I can't be too harsh, but they're being really disrespectful. We need to always point them back to respect. I need respect. That was not, can you try with a respectful response? Those types of things. Okay, so we have about 30 minutes, and I wanted to give you guys some time to split up into whatever your classrooms are going to be and actually develop kind of a game plan for the different empowering, connecting, and correcting, but specifically correcting strategies we talked about. And so the reason why I want to do that is because I've been to a lot of trainings like this, and I'm always really excited for the first hour, and then I kind of zone out, and then I go home, and then I think about it for a day, and then I get in the middle of launch, and I'm like, what were those things? I don't know, but I'm mad. I'm going to just give him a candy till he listens, okay? And so the idea is that you guys will develop this together, and you guys will hold each other accountable to this. We all wrote down these different things that we're going to do, we're going to identify, and we're going to sign it also. So you're signing your life away on this, all right? And I just put a self-reflection question on here for you guys to think about before you leave, which is, what do you need to give up or work through as you step into this opportunity? Okay, so I know I talked a lot. I went through a lot of material. Any questions? Clarification? My favorite color. Okay. All right, so I'll hand out the worksheets then, and I had a couple things up here on what's next, but we'll start with this here.
So what we're going to do is I passed around these little half sheets of paper here, or these little quarter sheets of paper. Everybody should have got one. If you're not, just look around. There's plenty. Don't be scared. Here. There you go. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. There's some extras. Okay, anybody need them? Yeah. Go and pass that back. Yeah, that's some extra. Yeah, that's exactly. All right. So what I want you to do on that little sheet is I want you to do 4 things. I want you to, and these are things that potentially your students will ask you, or you'll be talking about with your students here at lunch. They're going to ask you, so what is your favorite food? What is your favorite music? Now my kids at Highland Park, they know that I don't like rap very much, but I appreciate it. But they know that I like techno music and house music, so they're like, Mr. Cates, you're so corny. And so, all right. Then the favorite thing that you like to do during your free time. All right? What is the favorite thing that you like to do during your free time? And then the last thing, and this is what we are, all of us here at Launch really appreciate this. You could have chose any place to go in regards to volunteering, but you chose us. You chose to work with these kids. You chose this neighborhood. So why Launch? Why did you choose Launch? All right? And then what I want you to do, where is my thing at? I keep hearing this. Forget where it is. Then what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and come up here. Don't be starved. Come up here. You're going to put it in here. And then we're going to pass it around. You're going to find that person who has those different things. So no names. Don't put your names on her. Let me back up and say no names. I don't need your name. I didn't say names. When you're done, just raise your hand. This is not the ACT test, so. So again, your favorite food, favorite music, things you like to do during your free time, and why did you choose Launch? Again, you could have went any place in Topeka to volunteer, but why did you choose to come and volunteer with us? Okay. Yes, thank you. As you turn one in, I'm going to give you one back. I should actually wait. All right, one more minute, guys. Let's go. One more minute.
Okay.
Pass it out there.
We just did the same thing. I will get yours. Okay.
30 seconds.
Oh my goodness. Do you know? Yes. I wish I did. You can look like, no, you
I gotta mix them up. You might get somebody you know. Unless you know everybody.
I go to Harvey. It's really like odd kind of people. I mean, it's like boys $6.
Thank you. All right, it's time. Let's go. Yes.
But they're
Hey, Rose. There you go. All right, raise your hand if you've not gotten one.
Oh, I have.
Turn it in.
Oh, hello.
I wondered.
All right, who else needs one? Who else needs one? All right, everybody. We got a few more left. All right, go ahead and stand up. Stand up. Who needs one? Raise your hand if you need one. There you go. All right. Okay. I didn't give you one. I'm sorry. All right, has everybody got one? All right. You're going to have...
I don't have one. Thank you.
You're going to have 3 minutes. 3 minutes to go around the room, and you're going to try to find that person. Now, you cannot lie. If that person comes up to you and asks you these questions, you cannot make up other questions. Everybody understand? All right, let's go.
We need one. Yeah, I put mine in there.
Okay, yeah, right. I'm sorry.
Summer, did you do one?
Yes, you did.
What's your favorite food?
Are you sharing it?
No.
Okay, I'm
But I should have.
I know.
Everyone say that. And I don't know.
No, because I put mine in, but there's not another one to take. I put it in the back. So someone has me, but I don't have anyone else.
You're like Indian food, not favorite food Tex-Mex. Whose favorite food is Tex-Mex? Is your favorite food?
I should have written that though.
Whose favorite food is Tex-Mex?
All right. Minute and a half. Minute and a half. Everybody see these calculators. You found If you found that person, go ahead and sit down. If you found your person, go ahead and sit down. If you found your person, go ahead and sit down.
Yes. I said our either of your team's favorite food.
Could be somebody that's sitting down. All right. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Okay. So, can I get your attention, please? Can I get your attention? So this was the accelerated version. Typically, we would have a lot more time, and everybody would hopefully be able to find that person. But because of scheduling, we've got to make sure it's short. But who found somebody? Who found? Okay. What did you learn, sir? Right there. What did you learn about your person?
My person enjoys alternative.
Okay.
And then enjoys participating in crafty activities.
All right. Good job.
Oh my goodness.
All right. Anybody else? Who else? Somebody back here, ma'am. Yes.
Trina is who I found. She likes a lot of the same things I do, but even though mine didn't say that, I still enjoy
Outstanding. Anybody else? Anybody? Yes.
I learned that Lydia and I have the same taste in music.
Oh, that's fun.
All right, all about country. So to shorten this up, and again we're short on time, but there's beauty in engaging. So as volunteers, it's going to be up to you to come out of your shell. It's going to be up to you to talk about different things, to engage and build a relationship with your students, with the other volunteers, with the staff, because they're going to watch that. So one of the things I am constantly doing with my students at Highland Park is trying to figure them out and trying to build a relationship with them. So that's the point of this icebreaker. I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl, and she's going to give.
To talk really fast. I think I'm only going to do 2 or 3 slides, but I'm Cheryl Hishman. I'm the director at SENT. And so SENT is the organization that is the umbrella that this launch program is under, and it stands for Strengthening, Equipping Neighborhoods Together. So I just wanted to tell you just a little bit about it so that you'd know more about the program. I'm going to take 2 or 3 minutes, but this slideshow is really long, so don't be alarmed. So our mission vision is intentionally walking with neighbors through loving relationships and strategic development, bring holistic transformation of neighborhoods in Shining County. So you can see the intentionality of what we're doing through loving relationships, and that what we do is not just transform them, it transforms us, but it's transformed the whole entire family and a community. So I'll talk more. I'm going to really focus right now on the strategies of loving relationships, life-giving resources, and life-changing experiences, because it's going to flow into everything we're doing. That what you all are the glue of these loving relationships, and that's what every kid, every student is going to talk about more, are you. So we have got to do, like, every boundary we set, every correction we do, we have to do with love, so that they hear what our heart is, and that maybe this is the first time they've been corrected that way. But you all need to be that, and when you do activities, you encourage and you love them. So also that life-giving resources, that's why we do STEM. So these kids are going to have experiences that they may never had in a fun environment. Their schools are fun. They have cool things they're doing. But over their summer, to have this life-giving resources of a STEM program and relationships and the activities that we're doing is life-giving. So don't forget that there's purpose behind everything we do. And the life-changing experiences, I'm going to tell you two or three stories. Last summer, and people might even be in here, I can't remember who told me these stories, but one girl dissecting a pig heart. She was just really enjoyed it. Everyone at the table was pretty grossed out and hated it, couldn't wait for it to be over. And everyone at the table, including the leader, encouraged her that she probably needed to go into something with health and medical. Well, that same girl was the one who felt worthless the entire summer, that she was good at nothing. And she had that opportunity that day to hear that she was uniquely had an interest in that. So even though it's an activity that you think no one in my group is going to like, there's going to be one person in there that you see just dig in and like it. So don't forget that. And then there's also the opportunities for somebody to say, I like this electronics, and I could do it every day, all day. And maybe I need to be an electrician. And I've always wondered if that's my thing. So that just really keep reminding those students that this is something that you're good at. This is one of the things that you might consider doing, because they just don't hear that everywhere. So I wanted to show that apart from launch that we have other initiatives. So we're having housing programs and community wellness. Right now, our biggest community wellness program is with Christ First Counseling, what Haley's doing. And they meet down the hall in our offices. We have therapy rooms. So if you know somebody in your room and you know that they're saying, I just need more help, I'm desperate for help, we can connect them to those resources in our building for counseling. So that is real important for you to realize that we have their resources right here. We talk to their parents, we talk to them, we try to get them an appointment, and they can meet with somebody right here in our building, maybe before or after launch. I think that's where I'm going to stop. Does anybody have any questions about SENT or launch? Because I really want us to get to the rest of the policies. I had a lot more to say. Okay. you'll hear me again. I'll be back up here. Oh, I left some resources up here and brochures. So if you wanted to take something about Scent, I have those flyers. And I also have the launch flyers if you think you want to take it to show your folks or your family what you're doing this summer, or you need it to say you're going to tell about your program on your resume, then take the flyer, because then you can describe it better, because you're going to put it on an application. I have books if you really want to know more about what we're doing in our program that you can look at. I'm not giving my books away, but you can look at them. That's all. Turn this off. Who's next after me?
If you want to do the tour.
Oh. I want to do the tour. Thank you for reminding me that I'm a tour person. Should we walk down the hall and do a tour? That's what you intended? Okay, we're going on a tour. Come on.
No, he went down to the, like, through the Halloween in the back, and he had chiggers all over. So I was so embarrassed. And I was like, son, you gotta keep your hands up. And he was just, poor little guy was just miserable. I mean, I had chiggers my waist down, like, undie line. But who was it? You, it was you. So I said, I was careful to say my name.
I hate that word.
Oh my God.
One time I was, so I hate the word moist, and I was also, I
I know other people that don't like.
I said,
I know.
I said, there's another word I don't like, and Sandra was like, what is it? And she was like, just tell me what it is. And I was like, no. And I was like, it's another word for women's underwear. And she was like, panties. And I was like, yes, I hate it. She thought it was so funny.
It is. That's what. I put Diane Lee, Jack and Haley for forever. Like you put the filter in here and then you put the grounds in there and you pour the water over it and it just gets really nice.
Oh, she's so, I love her. I want some of her water. She has an Etsy now. Guys, I gotta get to trivia night. We'll wrap this up. What time is trivia? It starts at 8.
Oh, you're not gonna make it.
Well, I know, but I need to get there.
What is 39?
My teachers watch me on the local teachers who play every week. This week we're at AJ's. But the worship team wants to go to Chick-fil-A at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Because we're Gandhi.
When do they open?
Like, early. 6? No, they open before that, I'm pretty sure.
Chick-fil-A opens before 6?
If not, then it's exactly 6:30. Oh. That's where we're going. 6:30 a.m. Sorry, I was like so sure when it was.
It's like, who's gonna eat at Chick-fil-A at 5 a.m.?
You never know, man.
Here we go. We're back. I did my best. Tour.
Super fun.
I was like looking around going, you guys weren't there. And I go, well, you don't really need to go.
Yeah. We were like, we'll just save the space.
I
Okay.
Everybody make it out? Oh, there's one monkey though.
Okay. Now it's my turn. Hurry, hurry.
Oh, in this room, this is next.
I'll sit here and shuffle people into the back door so you can get started.
Okay. Okay, so I've been, so if, we're going to move through this. We only got about 30 minutes, and we're really trying to honor that. You guys have been really great in keeping us and really staying with us, and the trauma training was really good. Now we're going to move into the section where we talk about policies and procedures. Just some different things. I'm not going to really go into the volunteer roles. A lot of you already know you'll be in the classroom. There'll be other things like volunteering with registration during a lunch period. So those are all ways to volunteer. So if you know of anybody that is interested, we're still looking for volunteers, so definitely contact those people. Okay, so the chain of command. So basically, Adrian is in charge of everybody. That's basically it, right? So no, but there's so your classroom leaders. If you have anything that you, in regards to students and anything in regards to your classroom, you'll talk to them about it, and then they'll report to the student classroom coordinators, and then myself, I deal with stuff outside the classroom, policies and procedures, and just things like how, like there's a situation in the building, and so just policy and procedures, things, registration, stuff like that. So if you have questions about that, you can ask me. I'm going to keep moving because we're running out of time again. Child abuse. So one of the things, and this is on, if you want to go over to page, go to page 5. And I really wanted to slow dance with this, but I'm not going to have enough time to. But what I want you to do is I want you to really take a look at these 3 pages. So from page 5 to page 8, one of the things I want to really stress is that abuse in any form just simply won't be tolerated. It could be sexual abuse, it could be neglect, and one of the things that we have to do as volunteers, as staff, we've got to recognize abuse, and we've got to make sure that we are engaging in it. When I mean engaging in it, I mean, say for example, if you hear of a student that is being abused in any particular way, you cannot keep that to yourself. All right? As a teacher, I am a reporter. If I hear anything, any form of abuse, I have to report it to my administration. They have to report it to the higher ups, and even the police. So that is something that is very serious. If you are in doubt or if you have questions about, talk to your coordinators, talk to Cheryl and I, but I definitely would say talk to your coordinators, and they can definitely make that call, and they can definitely do the procedures. So one of the things that we will be doing is we'll be doing documentation. So if that does happen, there will be some form of documentation that will take place as well. So, okay?
Hey, Michael, can you explain who the coordinators are?
I think weren't they introduced earlier? No, maybe I wasn't in here. Why don't you guys stand up? Why don't you introduce yourselves?
I'm Joni Burkett. I'm the elementary age level coordinator. That's pre-K through 4th and 5th, and we're kind of sharing 4th and 5th because we realize they're getting ready to move on up.
Okay, so I'm Andrea Vincent. I'm the team coordinator. So 6th to 12th, really, but we kind of share the 4th and 5th. So if that is your classroom, you come to me, and then if you're with the littles, you go to Joni.
But if you see one of us and you need something, just. But I do want to say that in the past I've seen volunteers struggle with the idea of like, do I report this? Is this the kind of thing I report this? So just take that totally off your plate. Just come to one of us, and then we'll take it to the next level, and they'll take it from there. So just you don't have to sit and second guess yourself at all. I know that was stressful for some volunteers in the past. So.
And again, there are abuse takes forms in many different ways, so just keep that in mind. So if you see it, just go ahead and actually report it to your coordinators, and we'll handle it from there. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Please read these few pages because there's a lot of information in there, and it's going to be very helpful when you come into situations where you need to look at abuse and what abuse means. And I think Haley did a wonderful job of really kind of talking about the trauma effect of it. So that's my time. Thank you.
Wow, look at those coordinators. They're so cool.
Should have dressed alike or something.
Funny, you both wear stripes.
Well, yeah, I guess we did. First with the rest.
Okay. Get paper. Okay. So now we're gonna talk about volunteer and child protection. So this is just a lot of stuff to protect our kiddos and also protect you guys as a volunteer. So making sure that you have two volunteers in a classroom at one time, so you're not leaving one person with a bunch of kids, for your safety and the kids' safety. And then restroom policy. So almost every single room in the building, especially down the other hallway, will have a restroom in it. So the kids need to be using that restroom if that's the room that they're in. They're also going to be having water in their classroom, so that should help meet their needs and not have to have so many issues with them always wanting to leave, because you can really meet their needs in almost every room. So if you're in these rooms or the gym, that's really when you wouldn't have a restroom. So you'd use these. So there's like men's, women's right here. If you're with an older kid who can go to the bathroom by themselves, you don't need to walk them or be with them. Just like give them a pass or permission, whatever, and give a set amount of time, because we've had a lot of issues in the past with our older kids spending too much time in the bathrooms and causing issues that cost a lot of money for facility stuff. So just making sure they're not in there causing issues. Yeah, so last year, 2 years ago, we had a couple of middle school boys that stuffed a lot of toilet paper in the bathrooms and clogged it, so we had just a big mess. So to avoid a lot of things and to be good to our partner, our building partners, just try and give them like a time frame. I mean, you don't have to be like, hurry up, but it's just so we're not doing that. With littles, if possible, like if you're going somewhere, just take them all as a group and say, go to the bathroom, and just kind of in your line. If that's not possible and you have to take one, if it's possible to take 2 volunteers, you can do that. But if it's not, just go with the kid and then check the bathroom, make sure it's safe. You can have them go in there, but don't be like in a closed area with the kid in the restroom, just the 2 of you.
And in the classroom, you're going to run across probably a child or 2 that's going to need some help with something. Just don't go in there and shut the door. If you do go in there and you can grab another volunteer, leave the door cracked just a little bit. You want to give them privacy, but don't go in there with the door closed. And then if you can have somebody just standing close to you, because you might have to go in there and maybe help somebody sleep or something like that. It happens, or change clothes if they've had an issue. But just make sure that you don't go in there and close the door. You do try to give them some privacy and try to have somebody else right there with you so that no issues arise out of that.
Yeah.
So it's going to happen.
Appropriate touch.
Appropriate touch, that's probably one of the big things we learned from CFCC is that they would walk into the classroom and maybe see somebody sitting on somebody's lap, and they didn't realize that the child was being triggered. And so that's something we really, really want to avoid. And I think a good way to do that is yourself. If you're sitting on the ground, don't sit cross-legged. Just put your legs out to the side, and then if they want to sit on you, because there will be some of them that will want to, they can sit beside you. But if you're not sitting cross-legged and your lap's not really open, then it's a lot harder to sit on your lap. And then you're going to have a situation where you're sitting at the table and they want to sit on your lap. And what I always do is just say, hey, you can sit beside me. It makes it too tall, the table won't fit. You can sit beside me, because you do want to do everything with love, and you don't want to just, push them away. But you just have to be reasonable, and the littles might be the only one where we have more frequent contact, where they're actually sitting beside you or sitting on the edge of your leg, but just avoid sitting cross-legged and try to keep them off your lap at any cost. And the other thing is, don't just pick somebody up.
Yes.
I think Haley touched on that really well, because that can be triggering also. Some of them are going to want you to carry them. You might be outside with the pre-K and it's hot. We're not going to go out if it's too hot, but they might want you to carry them in, and they're just having a meltdown, and that might happen. We get that. But the little age is where we would have some contact like that. But otherwise, we're really, really going to work to avoid that. So we're not going to sit crisscross applesauce probably. That's verbiage that's used in schools a lot, but probably just put your legs out to the side, and that will help. And the other thing is maybe when they're coming in the classroom or they're leaving, some of the strategies I've used before that seem successful, and please raise your hand if you've got another one, is like when they're leaving or when they're getting there, it's like high five, handshake. We talked about that before. What are knuckles, and give them a choice. But I think it's okay to greet them, and you want them to feel welcome, and you want them to know that you're happy they're here. But that doesn't include a bear hug or scooping them up their feet. And I think everybody pretty much knows that, but we have to remember with certain ones that it just really takes them to another place and can be really triggering. So It teaches them how to express boundaries to people. So you might start that in your classroom at the door. I've seen lots of creative ways to do it. Sometimes they have complicated handshakes, sometimes they're just simple, but that's probably the best way to greet them and tell them goodbye. We give them a choice so they can express to you what's appropriate, and we'll help them understand what's appropriate.
Yeah. So attendance type stuff. So launch starts at 11, but the doors will open for kids to be able to come in at 10:45. So they'll just come straight to the lunchroom and eat lunch. All of the ages will, and so they'll check in there and sit and eat lunch. They can eat wherever they want, so it's not like a certain seat that they need to be in. If they're not gonna eat lunch, they'll go to their classroom. If they're done eating lunch, they'll go to their classroom. So your class will just have to make sure that you have the right amount of volunteers in the classroom versus in the lunchroom. With that, if a student comes after noon and we do not know about it prior, they won't be able to come that day. So once noon is there, you shouldn't be having a bunch of kids added to your classroom. If they're not going to eat lunch, they can come at 11:30. That's true of a lot of the high school students, but for littles, not really. So then for us, we would like you to be here like 30 minutes early because they can come 15 minutes early, and so we just want you to have time to get your classrooms ready and kind of regroup for the day. Parking, okay, so you can park, so this is Gulf Park, and then the street over here is called Colfax. So you can park anywhere on Gulf Park in any of our parking or behind the school. But on Colfax, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you cannot park over there. So Wednesdays you can, but Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's for parents as teachers and their people that come. And so just be mindful of where you park on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Yes?
If you said to arrive early and the doors aren't open, how do we get in? Where is it?
So Maria is her name. She will be at the front. It's typically her to buzz you in. So, right, no one can just come in, especially when launch will have the doors locked for safety, but she'll know, say you're with launch, say your name, she'll get familiar with your faces and you guys will be buzzed in, so you'll be able to come whenever.
And if you can't be here, if you could just, maybe something comes up or you're sick or throwing up or whatever, just if you could notify one of us as soon as possible, and then if at all possible, try to help find a replacement. I know sometimes that can be difficult, but just please notify us by cell phone as soon as possible so that we can get someone in your spot. So we know things happen. We just need a little notice so that we can figure.
Do we have your cell phones?
We should get it. I think it's, let me not misspeak. I think so too.
On here, in here.
That's what I was thinking it was, is the scent one. Well, we'll have to get, if it's, oh, look at her. Okay. So another thing with departure, if you are like a volunteer needing to leave like early, or you have a certain, no, I think that's the scent office. Okay. We'll get you our contact, for sure. So if you have to leave early for whatever reason, maybe that's like what your agreement is, that you leave at a certain time, just make sure that you tell your room leader and us so we know how many people are in the rooms and it's safe for kids.
Can we get your contact information now so they can write it down?
Yeah, I do have here.
I guess you can write down. Okay.
Jonah, you'll have to do yours.
I was gonna see if you knew it. Just watching.
Okay, let's see.
Can you guys see that?
Oh, you want me to say it out loud also?
Yes.
Okay, Andrea Vincent, 785-438-9790. If you're gonna text me, like put your name too so I can get it. Okay. Michael's giving me the signal.
Joni Burkett, 785-249-5147. You can touch the word on your way out. Michael's like,
You stay up here.
Yeah, we'll just stay up
You
here.
can just say. Okay, I am Haley Grant, and I am the administrative assistant for Cent, and I'm in charge of all the registration and check-ins. So the first week's going to be a little different. Whenever people come in, we're going to have that first door into the gym shut and locked, so they can't come in that door. They're going to come down to the second door in the gym, and they'll check in when they walk in, and then they'll go to get their lunch after we check them in. We're not accepting new launch students after the first 2 weeks of launch, so we're already at capacity. So if people end up registering before then, they're put on a wait list, and then we'll see what happens after the first week and see if we can make room for them. But we're very excited that we're at capacity, but there's just not room after the second week for us to let any other people in. There'll be volunteers at the check-in stations, and the kids will be checked in, like I said, at the entrance of the gym, and then they'll get a name tag, and whoever is picking them up will get a tag that goes with it with a barcode on it, and they have to have that to pick their child up. So if somebody comes to pick the child up and doesn't have that label, they need to come see us. And then also with checking out, we will have a spreadsheet of people who are able to pick the child up if they're not walking home, which their label will say if they're walking home or being picked up. If that person who's trying to pick them up is not on the list, we cannot let them go with that person. Even if you know the person and you know that they're related, we can't let them go with them. So there's not any exceptions on that. So you would need to contact your classroom leader, and they would need to call the parent and figure out if they're actually able to leave with that person.
You'll have numbers.
Huh?
You'll have numbers.
Yeah, we'll have a list of contact information for the parents, emergency contacts, and then the list of people who are able to pick the kids up. So.
No, she just answered my question.
Oh.
She was looking at me
I
like.
don't have any of the kids home.
Oh yeah, they'll be. You will have them in the classroom leaders. Will have them in their binders.
Yeah,
So,
we'll have those for you.
yeah, we'll have those for you whenever you come on Tuesday. So yeah, so like I said, just make sure that we're really careful about that. I don't know. I just can't stress that enough. We need to make sure we know who the child is leaving with. Because even if it's their parent or their brother or something like that, we don't know if they're supposed to be with that person that day or what's going on outside of here. So. Other than that, if there's any issues with check-in or registration, there will be volunteers who go tags will say registration, or you can come find me, but it should be pretty easy. They should be checked in by the time, they should be checked in when they get to lunch, so there shouldn't be much for issues as far as that goes in you guys' classrooms. Do you want me to talk about lunch?
I think Cheryl is.
Okay, cool. Lunch.
Okay, so I'm talking about the lunchroom. You guys were encouraging no one to bring outside food into the building. That means you and the students, etc. So they're going to be able, anybody under 18 can eat the 501 lunch. We have 501 lunches for 6 of our 7 weeks. So that last week we'll have a different lunches, but we're going to provide lunch. But 501, and we'll get audited and inspected. Someone will come check. We can't have adults eating that lunch or that kind of thing. So, but we also don't want to have you show up with a pizza or go to Chick-fil-A and that kind of thing. So if you happen to bring your food, then you're going to have to find an alternate place to eat, your car, or in special cases, an office, that type of thing. We're encouraging you to sit with the kids and eat, and then when kids want to leave, we're not having them run around the room until everyone in the class is done. You'll just take a few to the classroom. So that's how meals are going to work, and we're really grateful for our partner 501. We'll have some ladies serving our meals that are from 501, so if you could encourage the kids to be appreciative and you yourself to be appreciative, we'll have a better summer with them. Absolutely.
I love 501 meals. I do. I really love them. Better than Marine Corps food. All right. So my last point is security, and of course, the biggest thing is just being safe. Now, there are a number of things, like, for example, if you see a stranger in the building, that's something that's an immediate report. You want to make sure that you report that. The doors will be locked during the duration of the camp, so there won't be anybody coming in the building, and if you do see someone, just go ahead and report them very quickly. Another really important thing, you will be assigned or have name badges. You are to be wearing those name badges at all times. And so it'll be very important that if you lose that name badge, then that you go to your coordinator and you say, hey, I've lost my name badge, and you need to get one. You can't just go through camp without having a name badge. Does everybody understand that? Okay. All right, so medical concerns in your classroom. There might be a time where maybe a kid gets sick or something of that nature. You just need to report that to your coordinator, to myself, and then we'll go ahead and get it taken care of as quickly as possible. Things like weather and fire. So the hallway for tornadoes and different things, inclement weather, that is designated the safest place to go if there's a tornado. So the kids will go and just like a duck and cover or whatnot. When I was just dating myself, the kids will get down with their head, and you will do this as well. Hands over your head, and then sitting in a prone position and knees together, and you will make sure that the kids are doing the same. So you want to make sure you're doing that. But it'll be the hallway. So there's a tornado, if there's a fire drill, there's exit points, and I will be going around and going over this with every classroom leader and every volunteer to make sure. But if there is a fire, it's do not panic. And that's the biggest thing in all these situations. If the kids see you panic, then they're going to start becoming afraid, so you have to stay calm. And you have to, orderly fashion, leave the building, designated place. Make sure you take a list of all your kids.
Take your binder with your roster
Yes,
in it.
because if you, the staff will have radios, and so we'll be able to radio back and forth if the kid is missing, or if the kid is somewhere where they should not be, then we'll be able to find them very quickly. So it's very important that we adhere to those different things. Okay. Media, so the only person that should be responding to the media in regards to, let's say, for example, if an issue happens here in the building or with the student or with staff, the only designated person that can respond is Cheryl. So the best thing to do is somebody comes up to you with the microphone and the camera and says, what do you think about this? Just say no comment. I don't have a comment. Okay? And the last thing I want to talk about, and this is very important because you see this more and more around the country, is active shooters. So if there is an active shooter outside the building, and we hear it that it's in the area or whatnot, it will be an immediate lockdown of the building. That means nobody will be able to get in, nobody will be able to leave the building. If a parent shows up and they say, I can't get in, I need to get my kid, you just will, and then of course the staff, Cheryl, myself, the coordinators, we will talk to the parent, but there will be no one leaving the building during an active shooter, okay? And that means staff as well. It's total lockdown, all right? If there is an active shooter in the building, okay, we'll make sure the doors are locked, and that we will go around and the coordinators, myself and Cheryl will make sure the doors are locked. You will move your students away from the window, and you will get down and you will get to a very safe place. And we will be going through drills to get everybody acclimated to this and understand what they should be doing. Biggest thing, do not panic. You are in control of that classroom, and as a volunteer, you can make sure that experience goes really well for those children. So you've got to be very mindful of that. All right? So did I leave out anything? I think I got through that pretty quickly. All right. Any questions?
Do we have anything from the window there?
So we can definitely. Yeah, we can definitely get something made up, maybe like a cloth, and at my school that's what we do. We just cover the building,
roll them down.
And we'll put desk and everything against the wall, and we have a plan. That's another thing. Just make sure you have a plan. So coordinators, they'll be going around actually developing a plan. You know, there's some active shooters. If somebody's trying to get in your door, it is more within your right to resist. Okay, and that means making sure that door is locked, making sure the door is barricaded so somebody can't get in to get to you or your classroom. Unfortunately, when I was young, this wasn't unnecessary, but it is. So we've got to be very mindful of that, okay? Any questions on that? We'll talk about this a lot more. It's a very serious thing. Okay? Thank you.
It looks like the next three sections, corrective strategies, positive reinforcements, and disruptive behavior. We've talked about that. Haley did a really good job of talking about that. But one of our primary goals this summer is to not let negative behavior become such a big factor. In the past, it's there were certain days, certain times that it really just kind of dominated everything else we did. So we're going to really try to work really hard to set a positive tone. And I think we talked about, you need to be within 3 feet of somebody if you're correcting them. And something that I've always been trying to do is to take it off of them. We talked about that earlier and said, the thing is, if you keep stabbing Jimmy with your scissors, but talk about the behavior and say, the thing is, we're going to have to figure out some other way, for you to do whatever you're doing. Or the thing is, you need to make a choice, or try not to say we need to make a choice between, and you give them 2 reasonable choices. Or you ask them, how can I help you figure out how not to do whatever they're doing? So you all did the worksheets, and you did the level 1s, and then the level 2s. The level 3s might be where you're starting to think you might need some help. And then, did you guys get a chance to talk about the peace rooms, or we call it the refuel room? You'll have a radio, and if somebody's violent and there's an issue where you're concerned maybe for yourself or for another student, that's where somebody's probably going to need to be removed from the room. But we're going to stay calm, and sometimes you just have to get in between yourself and the student. And maybe the rest of the students are just going to go to an unexpected recess, or they're just going to go to the gym or something. Just, sometimes we don't want people physically picking up the student that might be becoming violent or chasing someone else, or we just don't want to physically manhandle them. You need specific training for that, and it sets you up for a lot of legal liability. So there may be an instance where you're going to, on the walkie, just call one of the coordinators, and the first and second, third grade group, we talked to Haley a little bit, and we thought maybe just saying, hey, we need some refuel help in the first and second grade room, or in room 103. Because we're not going to get on the radio and say, hey, I need somebody to come help me de-escalate because Jimmy's chasing everybody with scissors. And, you're just going to calmly say, hey, I need some refuel in room 103. And so that means Andrea or I or somebody, we're going to have somebody here on Wednesdays. They're trained in the social work field. And on Tuesdays and Thursday, it would be somebody from CFCC. They're going to calmly come to your room and help you figure out what's going on. And that student's probably going to go to the refuel room where they're going to get a chance to get it together, because the students that you are most likely to send home are the students that we really, really need here so they can gain some skills to be successful. So we're going to work really hard not to send students home, but we realize that you can't have that going on in your classroom. So we've set aside an area in 102 that we're going to call the refuel room, and we're going to have some strategies going on in there, and some instances where we can get them some help to maybe stay here. But if it needs to go a step further, maybe this isn't the right program for them, maybe there's something else going on, that some other professionals need to get involved. There will be people trained there that can help make that decision, and it takes it off of you. And the thing that we noticed in the past too was that it took our very best leaders out of the class, and they spent a lot of time in the hall with our friends that were having issues. So we're going to try and avoid that. And the other thing that I think is super important is to sometimes think about what you're doing. Because often we get wrapped up in, what the student's doing, but think about the environment in your room. What's going on? Is it super loud? Does the student do it every time? Jada sits next to him. Do they do it when they, when it's a transition? Transitions can be very, very difficult for these kids because oftentimes they don't know where they're going or who they're going with. So sometimes that can require some extra care. So just take a second and think about, could I do this differently? Or it's like Jimmy Ann said, take a minute and observe and try to figure out what's going on. And we really, really, really don't want to shame anybody. So we're going to try and get to the bottom of what's going on to help them. And we're not going to put any behavior charts on the wall. We're not going to shout out across the room, because I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't feel good to me because I make 100 mistakes a day. And if y'all were shouting out at me all day long, I'd just go home. So, and then the other thing, we have had a ticket system. We've had a store system in the past. First and second grade and third, we've talked about it a little bit. For the first week, if you're willing, we're not going to do any kind of ticket system. And we're not going to do a store. We're not going to do a big reward program because we think that that actually puts too much focus on the behavior. But we're going to put some jars, maybe like up on the top shelf in each room. One might have marbles, one might have little fuzzy pom-poms. And it's the same idea. If you see somebody doing something well, or, you know, Jada picked up trash for her neighbor or cleaned up her whole table, or she walked in line for the first time, you know, down the hall without bopping anybody. It's like we're just saying, thank you for walking down the hall like that. And here's a, you know, put something in the jar, put a pom-pom in the jar for the class. And then we'd like to try, once the jar gets full, because they'll be constantly monitoring and hopefully working together, supporting each other to get that jar full. And then we'd like to use the money that we were maybe going to do for the store, where we would buy things that might not be that meaningful, to maybe do like a pizza party or a movie and popcorn, but give them some choices for like a reward party, because we want to build some community amongst them, and have them maybe working a little bit for each other, or with each other and supporting each other. Because if Jada gets 500 tickets every week, and I'm trying to think of the boy's name, Eddie never gets any because poor Eddie, he just is struggling to get it together. That's not going to really help Eddie. I mean, Jada was going to get the 500 tickets regardless, but we've got poor Eddie here just watching Jada march up there with her 500 tickets and get something really cool, and he's still got nothing and can't get it together. So we're going to hope that they will band together as a community and see that jar as a constant monitoring of their progress, and try to catch them doing good and recognize that. So does that make sense? And does that seem like it might work, at least at trial basis? Because we feel like we have spent put a lot of emphasis on behavior in kind of a negative way. And so we're going to try and just work from a positive viewpoint, but realizing that sometimes other things can happen.
The only other things I would add, so at the back of your packet, there is 3 papers, all kind of about TBRI. 2 of them go together, and then one is kind of just like a resource list of other avenues to learn about TBRI, and then also about different things that Sent's involved with. So check that out, and then specifically for your 2 TBRI papers, I really, really, really need you all to read them and kind of understand them. That's really going to help your classrooms go smoothly and you all be on the same page. If you're reading it and you have questions like, I don't understand this, or it's not working, or explain it, or whatever, you can come to us. But this is really important. And then we'll kind of help you focus on, okay, these are the things that we're going to implement with TBRI, which is the trust-based relational intervention that we've been talking about. So I wanted to note those, and then kind of like a takeaway that I want you guys to get with the TBRI is there's a lot of different things you can do that are under TBRI, but the 3 biggest things that I want you to think about when you're dealing with behavior needs is the redos, the compromises, and the choices. So that's really an easy way to just start of like, these are the 3 ways that we're going to deal with behavior needs first. That's going to help, I think, things run smoother. So that's... Oh, the other thing I wanted to say, in the past, we have allowed a lot of different people to send a kid home if they thought that that was the need. This year, if you are thinking that a child needs to be home or removed from the class, you'll just give them to the de-escalation team or Joni or I, and we will make that decision after some different other options have been thought about. So... yes, we are excited.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, really quick, social media.
Yeah.
Okay, the last thing really quick, with social media, I just want to talk to you guys about that really quick. There are some kids who whose parents who have let us know that they don't want them in pictures. So just to kind of keep everyone out of trouble and keep everyone safe, we just ask that you don't post any pictures of the launch participants on your personal social media, whether you're a volunteer or a teacher. you can send us pictures, like you're welcome to still take them, but don't post them. We will use them for our website and for brochures and for our social media, but we would just rather you guys don't post them on your personal sites. If we share one on like our Instagram or something like that, you're welcome to reshare it, but don't post your own pictures on there.
We love it when you reshare.
Yes, we do. And also, you can friend and follow the launch participants, but we just highly encourage that you be very careful about the interactions you have with them. I really wouldn't recommend direct messaging or any sort of private messages. If you want to like their things or whatever, that's fine. But also, we don't want you guys giving your cell phone numbers to the participants. It just it's kind of like the social media with the direct messages. It just keeps everybody out of trouble, and especially if you don't know the parents, I would probably just know your boundaries, just be smart about it. And then also with your personal social media, just be careful about what you post with your own stuff. You're representing Scent and Launch, and so it's just really important that when people look at your profiles that they're seeing things that are positive and not making anyone look like they're making bad decisions or anything. So. And if you haven't been added to the GroupMe, come find me afterward, because we want to make sure that everybody's on that. That's probably going to be one of the main ways that we interact with you guys. So if you still need to be added to that, just let us know, and we will get you added to that.
What about the official sign
Yeah.
up?
Huh?
The official sign up, like the link that we send out to the volunteers, if they haven't done it yet, they need to do that.
Oh, yes, yeah. If you haven't filled out a volunteer form, we need you to go to the Scent website and fill that form out, because that's how we have all of your contact information, and we also have it in our system so that your names and information are all in there for anything in the future, and then it also just makes it easier for us to search through things and things like that. So if you haven't filled that out, please go and fill out that form.
I got two more quick things. I want to thank you guys, first of all, for 3 hours and just really being diligent and just being responsive. One more thing is, of course, we have the kickoff. It's going to be June 13th, and that is going to go from 3:30 to 5 o'clock, and it's going to be a huge, big event. We're going to have a helicopter, a Black Hawk Down is going to be here. Isn't that cool?
I don't know, but that's a movie.
Black not down.
It's just the hell.
Black Hawk.
No, it's not. No down.
Sorry, no down.
It's not.
Well, it's gonna land.
Yeah, well, I think
It's
of that.
not
So we're gonna
gonna
have
be
a Black
bad.
Hawk helicopter, and it's gonna be really amazing. But there's also gonna be just a lot of opportunities to volunteer. So if you know of anybody else that is interested in volunteering, then please get with us. There's still opportunities that we have in the classroom as far as registration. One of the things I do want to make sure that, and this is something as far as registration-wise, that we still need to do some background checks. So if you've not been affiliated with the
Church or school.
the church, or you've not are a teacher, we do need to make sure we gather your information. So what I'd like you to do, if you have and you've been asked to bring 2 forms of ID, I want you to go with Haley so she can actually get your IDs, and so we can get that information into the system. So that's
Take your
extreme.
ID, she'll make it.
Yeah,
She'll
I'm
make
gonna
a copy.
take them.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's the most important thing. All right.
If you can help with the kickoff, I definitely encourage you to. If for some reason you can't be there, does anyone know? Can most of you be there? Do you know?
We also have hot dogs and a bounce
Okay,
house,
yeah,
not
it's
just
right.
a
It's
Black
right
Hawk.
after launch, so I'd recommend just staying. It's a good opportunity to hang out with the kids and meet their parents, and just have a good time. So it's only a couple hours after launch. So if you can stick around, that would be great.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good day. So thank you guys so much. Again, you guys could have volunteered anywhere in the city of Topeka, but you chose us, and we appreciate it. And the kids really are going to be excited about it. So we're going to have a great year. Thank you again.